I used to believe in the warmth of family, in the safety of love. My daughter's wedding had been the happiest day of my life. She had found someone I thought I could trust, someone who seemed kind, charming, and devoted to her happiness. From the very first meeting, he had smiled and bowed politely, praising my daughter and showering her with attention. I welcomed him into our home, proud that my little girl had found such a man. But appearances are dangerous, like fragile glass hiding a jagged edge. The first cracks appeared almost imperceptibly. A careless remark here, a cold glance there, a suggestion that undermined my parenting. I shrugged them off, telling myself I was imagining things. I wanted to believe in him, in the family we were building together. That summer, we decided to take a trip to the cliffs, a remote, breathtaking stretch of coast where the waves crashed violently against jagged rocks below. I remember laughing as my daughter ran ahead, the wind playing through her hair. Her husband followed closely behind me, and for a moment I felt the illusion of safety settle over me like a soft blanket. It happened so suddenly, I barely had time to register it. One moment we were walking along the narrow path, the next I was teetering on the edge. I turned, startled by his sudden movement, and in that instant his hand struck me. The world flipped. The cliff disappeared beneath me, and gravity took over with brutal certainty. Pain exploded through my body as I hit the jagged rocks below. Every breath was fire, every movement agony. For a moment, I wondered if the universe had finally decided I was to be erased. Yet somewhere deep inside, a spark refused to die. I clawed, dragged, and rolled until I lay on a small ledge, bloodied, broken, but alive. The wind howled above me, carrying the faint echoes of laughter and footsteps that should have been my family's safety net. As I lay there, staring at the cliff's edge and the distant figures of my daughter and her husband oblivious, or perhaps calculating, I felt a cold, terrible clarity settle over me. This was no accident. The betrayal had been deliberate. The person I had trusted most, the one I had welcomed into my heart, had tried to kill me. And in that moment of despair, of shattered trust and searing pain, I made a silent vow I would survive. I would rise from this ruin, not for revenge alone, but to reclaim the dignity and life he thought he could steal. And when the time came, I would make him understand the true cost of betrayal, not through violence, but through the exquisite, painful truth of seeing his life unravel under the weight of his own actions. The cliff had taken my balance, my sense of security, and nearly my life, but it had not taken my resolve. The days after the fall were a blur of pain, hospital rooms, and endless nights spent staring at a ceiling that offered no comfort. Every movement was agony, every sound a reminder of how close I had come to death. Yet even in that haze of suffering, one thought refused to leave me. He had tried to kill me. My own son-in-law, the man I had trusted, had betrayed me in the most monstrous way imaginable. Recovery was slow. My body ached with every step, but my mind refused to weaken. Each scar, each broken bone became a reminder, not of weakness, but of survival. And as I healed physically, my mind began to sharpen, turning the chaos of that moment into cold, deliberate clarity. He had underestimated me. He had assumed a push off a cliff would end me. And in that assumption, he had made his first grave mistake. I began to study him. Every interaction, every word he spoke, every expression he wore became data. I noticed the way he flinched when challenged, the way his charm faltered when confronted with authority, the way greed flickered behind his eyes when he thought no one was watching. My daughter, blinded by love and loyalty, saw none of it. She still trusted him completely, laughing at his jokes, defending his slightest missteps. That would make his downfall all the sweeter. I found myself consumed by planning, not out of hatred alone, but out of a need for justice, a precise, unyielding justice that would make him feel the full weight of what he had attempted. My revenge would not be hasty. It would be like a tide, slow, inexorable, and devastating. I would start small, testing his nerves, probing his vulnerabilities, watching as fear and doubt began to take root. The first step was subtle. A misplaced file at work, a minor accident orchestrated to make him doubt his own competence, a whispered rumor that planted seeds of suspicion in his colleagues' minds. Each action was small, almost invisible, but it left its mark. I watched him stumble, felt the delicious spark of satisfaction when he questioned himself, when he wondered if perhaps his luck, or his mind, was failing him. But even as I plotted, I reminded myself this was not about cruelty. This was about reclamation. My daughter's love, my family's peace, and my own dignity had been shattered. I would rebuild them, stronger than before, and I would do it while he was unraveling in a web of his own making. And so, from the ashes of betrayal and pain, I emerged not broken, but transformed. Each scar became a weapon, each memory of the cliff a sharpened edge. I was no longer the person who had smiled at him, welcomed him into my home. I was something colder, something wiser, and something unstoppable. The nightmare for him had only just begun. By the time I stepped back into the world that had tried to destroy me, I was no longer the same person. My body had healed, and my mind had sharpened into a weapon far more dangerous than any fist or knife. I no longer needed to confront him directly. The true power of revenge lay in the shadows, in whispers, in carefully orchestrated moments that made him doubt himself and the world around him. It began with small, almost invisible disruptions. A cancelled meeting here, a misdirected message there. Nothing overt, nothing that could trace back to me. Yet each incident made him stumble, left him questioning his memory, his competence, even his sanity. I watched from a distance as frustration crept into his posture, tightness into his voice. He was unraveling piece by piece, and I reveled quietly in the slow burn of his downfall. I made sure to remain invisible, blending seamlessly into the background while carefully manipulating the world around him. I exploited every flaw I had observed during my recovery: his pride, his greed, his impatience. Colleagues began whispering about mistakes he had never made. Friends noticed his erratic behavior. Even minor public humiliations left him flustered and paranoid. My daughter noticed too, though not yet what I was doing. She began to doubt his judgment, puzzled by inconsistencies, unsettled by his growing irritability. It was subtle, a tension creeping into their marriage that made her question her own perception of him. That doubt would be essential later, a crack through which the full truth would eventually slip. Each night, I meticulously catalogued my progress. Every falter of his ego, every fear ignited, every doubt seeded. It was all part of the design. My revenge was not merely to punish, but to make him understand the magnitude of his betrayal. I wanted him to feel powerless, to recognize that life could turn on a single moment of cruelty, and that his moment had arrived. Yet, even in my calculated wrath, I wrestled with conflicting emotions. I loved my daughter, and I feared for her heart, for her illusions. My revenge had to be surgical, leaving her unharmed while letting the sun in, Law collapse under the weight of his own sins. This duality kept me vigilant, careful, patient. Impulse would ruin everything, and then the first undeniable success came. A public meeting where a minor miscommunication I had orchestrated left him flustered in front of colleagues and clients. His face burned with embarrassment, and for the first time I saw doubt. Pure, raw doubt flicker across his eyes. I had struck without touching him, and the thrill was intoxicating. From that moment, I knew the path forward. The nightmare for him would grow darker, more intricate, as I continued to pull the strings. Every move he made, every misstep he suffered, would be my message. No act of betrayal goes unpunished. And all the while, he would never see me coming. The shadows were mine, and in them I was unstoppable. By the time I stepped into the final phase of my plan, the son-in-law was already a shadow of the man he had once pretended to be. Each calculated disruption, every whispered rumor, every carefully engineered accident had chipped away at his confidence, leaving cracks that were now gaping chasms. His arrogance had turned into paranoia, his charm into tension, his every decision weighed down by fear of unseen enemies. Little did he know the enemy had always been closer than he imagined. I orchestrated a series of events that would expose him completely. At work, he faced public embarrassment. Mistakes appeared under his name that he could neither explain nor deny. Contracts he had thought secure slipped away, and colleagues began avoiding him, whispering behind closed doors about his sudden incompetence. At home, I planted subtle evidence of his selfishness and deceit, ensuring my daughter would begin to see the truth without me saying a word. The most satisfying part was the psychological unraveling. I made him question every relationship, every word of loyalty from friends and family. He became volatile, defensive, desperate. I watched quietly, invisible, as he lashed out at everyone around him, isolating himself until even those who had once admired him now kept their distance. The web of his own lies and manipulations had turned into a cage, and I held the key. Finally, the confrontation came. Not violent, not physical, but devastating in its clarity. My daughter, now awake to the truth, confronted him. The betrayal, the lies, the attempt on my life, everything was laid bare. I observed the scene with a calm satisfaction. The man who had pushed me off a cliff, the one who had thought he could escape consequence, crumbled in front of his own family. He tried to defend himself, to twist the story, but the evidence, the subtle manipulations, and the pattern of his behavior left no room for excuses. He had been so careful, so sly, yet he failed to anticipate one thing. Patience, cunning, and moral authority can be more lethal than hatred. I had allowed him to destroy his own reputation, to feel the weight of fear and uncertainty, to confront his own inadequacy. And now, stripped of power, stripped of illusion, he faced the ruin he had built with his own hands. As my daughter held me that night, tears streaming down her face, I felt a peace I had not known in months. The fear, the pain, the anger, it was all gone. Justice had not been violent, but it had been absolute. I had survived the fall, I had endured betrayal, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and victorious. The cliffs no longer haunted me, they had forged me. My family, tested by betrayal, was now whole again, stronger for having endured. And as for him, the son-in-law who had thought he could erase me, he was left with nothing but the consequences of his own cruelty. In the end, survival had not been enough, but revenge, tempered with patience and strategy, had been perfect.